Part 73. Weird Star Witch. Author, White Silver Black Iron. Chapter 722. This starlight ship is so practical, much more practical than our previous Green Skull and Volcano. Standing at the bow of the Starlight South ship, Cooper touched the blue railing of the Starlight South ship, which was slightly cool to the touch and was made entirely of star power. Every time he rode the South ship, Cooper felt very novel. The wizard's abilities were complex and varied, which made other apostles very envious. When can I control the body of a wizard from the South ship? I also want to use such a Starlight South ship, which can fly in the sky and swim underwater, Cooper said. Rudolph, why don't you go fishing and take the South ship secret room out, and then I will kill the South ship wizard, so that I will have the body of the South ship wizard. Rudolph rolled his eyes at Cooper and did not reply. The Starlight South ship was flying in the sky with several scavengers on board, and Rudolph was also at the railing, looking down at the ground. On the road on the ground, there were families migrating. Many people couldn't buy train tickets, and didn't want to wait in fear, so they found a carriage to take their families and valuable luggage to flee their hometown. Outside Belfour, Rudolph said, "Wait for me here, I'm going to get something." Only Zachary knew that the thing Mr. Furness was talking about was the last level 8 giant air blast bomb, the darling of the Constitutional Army. In the basement of the Constitutional Army Division headquarters, Colonel Adiya was guarding the level 8 giant air blast bomb, which was his only mission. The recent bad situation made him a little nervous. He squinted his eyes, stared at the giant safe, and looked at the giant air blast bomb from the observation window. The evil god navy that occasionally cruised in the open sea disappeared. According to intelligence, the evil god navy went to the waters further north. After research, the staff believed that the evil god cult discovered the large-scale migration of people from the Eagle's Beak Peninsula. They are likely to raid the rear, block the migrating people, and prevent ordinary people from leaving the Eagle's Beak Peninsula. If most ordinary people leave, the evil god church will be very uncomfortable. No ordinary people means no sacrifices. Without sacrifices, there can be no sacrifices and no temples can be built. Each of the 6 evil gods must build at least one temple, which means at least 6 sacrifices must be made, otherwise the spoils will be unevenly distributed within the evil god cult. Adiya thought that he would take a giant air blast bomb and follow the main force of the Constitution Army to fight against the evil god cult navy. However, a few days have passed and he has not received any action orders. The members of the parliament believe that they should still defend Belfour and wait for the support of the Constitution Army Navy. As long as they wait for the Constitution Army Navy and defeat the evil god navy, Belfour will be saved. Once Belfour is lost, 1/3 of the wealth of the Eagle's Beak Peninsula will be reduced to ashes. The Eagle's Beak province implements a policy of strong capital. 1/3 of the province's population and more than half of its wealth are concentrated in Belfour. For the members of parliament, this is an absolute core interest. Colonel Adiya suddenly felt dizzy. He rushed to the observation window and found that the giant air blast bomb in the observation window had disappeared. The giant safe was like a container, with a large space. There were originally 2 giant air blast bombs in it, and Rudolph used one. Inside the giant safe, the Starlight Lizard swallowed the giant air blast bomb, making it disappear inside the safe. The Starlight Lizard easily passed through the safe wall that was more than 30 centimeters thick and left the safe. "Mr. Furness. Mr. Furness, is that you?" Colonel Adiya looked around in panic. At this moment, he hoped very much that it was the Furness that stole the giant air blast bomb, not the evil god priest. Rudolph's figure appeared near the window. "It's me, Colonel Adiya." Seeing the Furness, Adiya was relieved at first. It was good that it was not lost. Then he immediately became nervous. "Mr. Furness, what are you going to do with the giant air blast bomb? This is an important weapon for defending Belfour. Adiya is very smart, in fact, He has already vaguely guessed the reason. I will take this air blast bomb to Malone City. We can't let the evil god cult block the refugees' migration, otherwise everyone will die, and they will die on the Eagle's Beak Peninsula. If the evil god cult builds a temple in Malone City, they will have a tight pocket, and ordinary people on the Eagle's Beak Peninsula will have no hope. They will either become sacrifices or believers. Colonel Adiya's face was very ugly. The thing that made the Constitutional Army most worried happened. The idea of the furnace and the Constitutional Army was different, and the furnace could not be persuaded. He would use force. At this time, the furnace was no longer an ally of the Constitutional Army, but a violent and fierce wizard. Even if the commander-in-chief of the Constitutional Army, Stein, came, it would be useless. The furnace would not listen to anyone's opinions, but would only act according to his own values. Is there no room for negotiation, Mr. Furnace? Without the giant air blast bomb, the congressmen will go crazy. Of course not, there are only a few congressmen, and there are so many refugees who are migrating, there is no comparison at all. Colonel Adiya lowered his head and said after a few seconds of silence, "Okay, Mr. Furnace, I will delay time and not tell the parliament that you took the giant air blast bomb." Rudolph shook his head and said, "It's not necessary, you can tell everyone, no one can stop me on the Eagle's Beak Peninsula, and you will have less responsibility if you report it earlier. Put all the blame on me, this little problem is nothing. Oh, by the way, I can knock you out, it will be more realistic." Adia was about to say something, but a starlight water snake appeared on his neck at some point. Adia's body softened and he slowly fell to the ground. Rudolph looked at the other officers, and the other officers also fell to the ground, leaving only the last officer. "What are you doing? Hurry up and report the changes here to the parliament." The figure of the furnace disappeared, and the officer hurriedly shook Colonel Adia, but found that he couldn't wake him up. Only then did he know that the furnace really found an excuse for them. He rushed outside and rushed to the division headquarters to report that the furnace had attacked Colonel Adia and stole the giant air blast bomb. Division Commander Rubio and Speaker Hart came to the giant safe one after another. The safe had been opened and there was nothing inside. Looking at the empty safe, Division Commander Rubio and Speaker Hart were silent. The furnace was still the uncontrollable and elusive wizard. He would fight with the evil gods on the front line, and would also steal the killer of the Constitution Army unexpectedly. When Adiya woke up, Rubio asked, "Did Furnace say where he went?" Malin City. He went to Malin City with a giant air blast bomb to stop the evil cult there." After sighing, Rubio and Speaker Hart said, "Block this news, otherwise your congressman will go crazy." "Yeah, block the news, otherwise what can you do?" Weird Star Witch. Author, White Silver Black Iron. Chapter 723. Malin City is located at the northernmost tip of the Eagle's Beak Peninsula. A few dozen kilometers northwest of Malin City is the city of Jalan, the estuary of the Garan River. The sea area near these two cities is called the Malin Bay. The evil god cult navy was reluctant to come here before, as it might encounter a large number of Constitutional Army navy here. However, the migration of the people of the Eagle's Beak Peninsula made the evil god cult believe that it had suffered a huge loss. These people are the sacrifices for the future and the source of the temple's faith in the future. How can they be lost easily? Every priest felt like he had been cut off, losing a large number of believers and wealth that belonged to him. A fierce battle had just ended at the estuary of the Garan River, that is, on the sea outside the port of Jalan City. The evil god cult navy paid a heavy price and defeated the Constitutional Army navy that went out to sea from the Garan River. The Constitutional Army navy brought a level 8 giant air blast bomb and used a specially made level 8 artillery to destroy a quarter of the evil god cult navy with one shot. Before, outside the port of Belfort, 1/3 of the evil god navy was destroyed by the furnace, and this time it lost the remaining quarter. Unlike the grand occasion when leaving the port of Nauyi in the southern continent, the evil god navy lost half of its ships in 2 naval battles. Faced with these losses, the cardinal priests of the evil god cult did not feel much heartache. As long as the last battle is over, the entire Eagle's Beak Peninsula will belong to the evil god cult. 2 temples have been built in Dani City in the south, and the temples will slowly cover every city on the peninsula. The people of Jilun City were very desperate when they saw the defeat of the Constitution Army Navy. They thought that Jilun City would soon become the parish of the evil god cult. However, after defeating the Constitution Army Navy, the evil god Navy left. The goal of the evil god Navy is to eliminate the living force of the Constitution Army Navy, and then go to Malone City to tie up the pocket for the Eagle's Beak Peninsula without interference. If a temple is built in Malone City, the Eagle's Beak Peninsula and the people on the peninsula will belong to the great evil god, and no one will escape. Without the Constitutional Army Navy, Malone City is like a peeled egg. A few days later, in the clouds dozens of kilometers away from Malone City, Rudolph ended today's divination. He looked desperate, and a huge sense of powerlessness made him cold all over. Yvonne saw that Rudolph looked wrong, and asked hurriedly, "What's wrong, Rudolph?" "There is still hope, there is still hope, don't give up." Others heard Rudolph's murmur and looked at each other. They had never seen such a Rudolph. He had always been a decisive actionist, but now he needed to rely on talking to himself to increase his confidence. Rudolph had never been so pessimistic before. Everyone's eyes fell on the face of Duke, the director of the Tribunal of Eagle's Beak Province, and Duke was very embarrassed. He caught up with the furnace halfway and wanted to come to Malone City with the furnace. Unexpectedly, he encountered a desperate situation that the furnace was not sure to deal with. The Constitutional Army was too slow. It was the furnace in the far south that brought people to Malone City. These tasks should have been done by the Constitutional Army. Cooper said, "Rudolph, has the evil cult taken over Malone City?" Rudolph nodded, "I divine the danger. If I continue to move forward, my life will be in danger. Now the only thing that can threaten my life is the temple. There is no doubt that Malone City has fallen. What should we do? Should we continue to move forward?" Rudolph was also very hesitant. After a long silence, he said, "The Eagle's Beak Peninsula is long from north to south and short from east to west. There is only one railway track. This railway track is the main artery of the peninsula, and Malone City is the beginning of the main artery. I believe in my divination, Malone. Something has happened in Malone City. We will land immediately. You are responsible for stopping the passenger trains on the rails. No one can enter Malone City. Anyone who enters Malone City will become a sacrifice of the evil god cult. Let the people on the train get off, and then organize a route around Malone City, so that the refugees can leave the Eagle's Beak Peninsula on foot. Director Duke, organize nearby police officers and witch hunters, or Constitutional Army as soon as possible, and be sure to stop the refugees heading to Malone City." Zachary took out a map at the right time, and a starlight table rose on the deck of the Starlight South ship. Zachary handed Rudolph a pen. Rudolph looked at the map around Malone City and drew an arc. This arc started from their location, with a radius of about 20 kilometers, and circled to the north of Malone City. Rudolph suddenly grabbed Duke, and Duke didn't care about his shoulder being grabbed, because he saw bloodshot eyes in the furnace. "Did you hear that, Duke? No one can enter Malone City anymore. Malone City has now become a black hole that swallows sacrifices. Every passenger train must be stopped, and the road must be blocked so that people on the road can change their routes. The refugees must bypass Malone City and flee from other places." "I know, Mr. Furnace, I will do as you say." The Starlight South ship is still far away from Malone City. It seems to be calm here, but Rudolph's red eyes and cold tone prove that Malone City has now become a demon cave and a paradise for the evil god cult. before the second temple in the north is built, this arc corridor will become the last hope of the Eagle's Beak Peninsula. More people must be allowed to leave the Eagle's Beak Peninsula through this corridor, otherwise they will all die, or live a life worse than death. Rudolph looked at his people and said with concern. You should also be careful, always pay attention to your position, and never enter the 20-kilometer range of Malone City. We will meet safely in the north of Malone City, take care. Ivan asked worriedly, Rudolph, what about you? I'll go to Malone City to see if I can do anything to make the Malone corridor last longer. The Starlight South ship landed near the railroad tracks. Others got off the ship and watched the Starlight South ship take off again, quickly climbed, and disappeared from sight. Ivan, don't worry, there are still 8-level giant air blast bombs on the Starlight South ship. Rudolph will be fine. How could Ivan not worry? Rudolph has the ability to be reborn from the ashes and absolutely concealed. Only the temple can threaten his life, but he still flew to Malone City, where the temple may have been built. Duke was cursing the councillors of Belfour in his heart at this moment. It was they who voted unanimously to protect Belfour first, causing Malone City to become the parish of the evil god without any resistance. Fortunately, the furnace directly took the giant air blast bomb. If we were to reason at this time, it would be too late. He turned to the 3 subordinates behind him and said, You disperse to the surrounding towns, cities, and county towns, gather people, and mobilize the witch hunters, police officers, and constitutional army to start the evacuation of the Malone corridor immediately. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Weird Star Witch. Author, White Silver Black Iron. Chapter 724. More than 20 kilometers away from Malong City, a train was moving slowly forward, with the locomotive spewing white steam, which was the water vapor from the steam engine. In front of us was Malong City. As long as we crossed Malong City, we could leave the peninsula. There were people sitting on the roof of the train. The conductor put ropes through 2 opposite windows and threw them to the top of the train so that the people on the top of the train could also have a place to hold. This train, which had several additional carriages and was obviously overweight, slowly moved forward with the hopes of a carload of people, away from the increasingly severe evil cult disaster behind it. However, the train suddenly sounded a sharp whistle, and there was a harsh friction sound between the rails and the iron wheels, and the heavy train began to slow down. The people on the top of the train fell forward one after another, and they looked up and saw a huge black shadow in the dark night ahead. It was a giant among the heretic apostles. The giant blocked the front of the train and forced the train to stop. A carload of people began to curse, and they hoped that the train police on the train could attack quickly and drive away the giant. When the police got off the train and rushed forward along the rails, they saw the witch hunters' flares. Duke, the head of the judgment hall, walked quickly from the front. He found the captain of the police and said very quickly, Quick! Organize people to get off the train. Malon City is no longer safe. It has been captured by the evil god cult Navy and has become the parish of the evil god cult. Give me a map and I will mark the safe escape direction for you. You organize people to take everyone on the train away on foot. When the captain of the police was studying in Belfour City, he met Duke, the head of the provincial judgment hall. He knew that all this was true, otherwise a head would not be able to do such work here. Also, send a few people to the rear to intercept other trains, and don't let the 2 trains collide. The captain of the police looked at the route drawn by Director Duke on the map and said in horror, Director, this section of the road alone is at least 40 kilometers. If these passengers walk with their luggage, it will take at least 10 hours. They can't be willing to go. Now it's not a question of whether they are willing to go, but whether they can survive. Tell all passengers that entering Malone City means death. Go. The captain of the police saw that Director Duke was so determined, and he also realized the seriousness of the problem. He quickly turned around and ran to the train, directing the police to evacuate the passengers. The police were surprised to hear the news brought by the captain. A big city like Malone City really fell? The police announced the decision of the court in a train compartment, asking them to get off the train and walk away. The passengers cursed when they heard such a request, but since it was related to their lives, they could only follow the crowd. The train was easy to solve. There were many roads leading to Malone City, and those roads needed more manpower. Duke found Yvonne and said, "Miss Yvonne, I have to ask you to walk through the Malone corridor first. I hope there are no ambushes of priests in this corridor." "Okay." Yvonne left with the first wave of refugees. Cooper was commanding the giant to break the rails. Even if the rails were destroyed, the train could no longer carry a large number of people into Malone City. At the front of the refugee team, the captain of the police used a flashlight to illuminate the map and slowly moved forward. At first, the refugees could still carry their boxes. After walking for a distance, these refugees found that their luggage was so heavy that they could only let the luggage swing against their legs. Some refugees finally opened the boxes and threw some not so important things in the boxes on the side of the road. It is called the Malone Corridor, but there is no road here, just an arc 20 kilometers away from Malone City. People who bought precious train tickets envied those who took the carriage at the beginning. It is much more comfortable to ride a horse, unlike now, they have to rely on their legs to walk. A few hours later, the witch hunters brought back police officers and witch hunters from nearby towns. These people were sent by Duke to the nearby roads to intercept passers-by on the roads. The roads were also destroyed by the witch hunters, telling everyone that the roads here were blocked. A long dragon of lights appeared on the Malone corridor. On the clouds, Rudolph quickly entered the faith radiation range of the temple, and the palpitation made him feel uncomfortable. He increased the flight altitude, entered the absolute hidden state, and flew at an altitude of 10,000 meters. This altitude was out of the faith radiation range of the temple and was safer. Rudolph felt that the skylight was a little too bright this night, and it caused light pollution to the starry sky, making those originally faint stars even more difficult to distinguish. This light became brighter and brighter until a giant luminous object appeared in Rudolph's field of vision. "I don't know what means the evil god cult used." A 100-meter-high pyramid appeared in the suburbs of Malone City. Looking closely, the pyramid is still under construction, and believers are still cutting stones. This pyramid was actually cut out of a whole stone mountain. If it is seen by believers who come to Malone City for the first time, they will definitely think it is a great miracle. There is a long staircase in the center of the pyramid, which allows people to walk up to the top of the pyramid step by step. There is a huge light bead on the top of the pyramid, which emits a strong light at night. Rudolph's divination is correct. The White Demon Church has built a temple in Malone City. Looking at the light bead on the pyramid, Rudolph can feel that the star power in his body has become stagnant. The evil god White Demon calls himself the Lord of Holy Light. Under the illumination of the Holy Light, all blasphemers will lose the ability to resist. The city of Malone was as bright as day because of the Holy Light. All the buildings were illuminated by the Holy Light, and long shadows were cast in the direction of the Holy Light pyramid. In the distant port, ships of the evil god cult were docked at the port, and these ships finally completed their mission. Now the evil god cult no longer needs these ships, they don't need naval battles, and the Sarago Sea has completely become the inland sea of the evil god cult. At this time, believers were crawling on the streets, and the priests were using divine arts to illuminate the heads of these believers. Regardless of men, women, old or young, as long as they are baptized by the Holy Light, they will have a bald or even shiny head, and their hair will be curled by high fever and finally fall off completely. These believers are half of the people who survived in Malone City, and the other half have gone to nowhere. The sacrificial ritual of the Oblivion is a meat grinder, and the sacrifice of the insect nest is to dissolve pus. I don't know what the sacrifice of the white devil looks like. Rudolph came late and didn't see the sacrifice of the white devil. Soon, he found clues of the white devil's sacrifice. In the distance of the pyramid, some large stones have not been dealt with. There is a cavity on each side of the stone, which can form a complete closed chamber with other stones. The cavity is similar to the outline of a person, and that is where the sacrifice is placed. In other words, there is a cavity between every two stones in the Holy Light Great Pyramid, and a sacrifice may be sealed in it alive, and these sacrifices are used to provide the power of faith for the sacrifice ceremony. Rudolph looked down at the magnificent Holy Light Pyramid, wondering how many sacrifices were sealed in this 100-meter-high pyramid. Weird Star Witch. Author, White Silver Black Iron. Chapter 725. Rudolph was suspended in the sky, with a starlight lizard sitting under him, and a level 8 giant air blast bomb in the belly of the starlight lizard. The southern sky vela brought the ability to fly, and Rudolph and the starlight lizard could fly freely in the sky with the strong wind. What he had to do was to detect the actions of the evil god cult and then prevent the evil god cult from building a second temple in the east of Malone City. He was late. Malone City belonged to the White Demon Church, and the people who survived here had become White Demon believers. Soon, Rudolph found the sacrifice. Near the train station, Rudolph saw people who were imprisoned together in the coal storage yard. Some of these people were refugees who came to Malone City from the south, and some were farmers in towns and villages near Malone City. They were not bald, but had hair. Malone City is a large county in the north of Eagle Mouth Province, which manages 7 smaller cities. The county city has a large population, and the land around the county city is fertile, with many farmers. The White Demon Church built a high wall around the coal storage yard to prevent these people from being affected by the Holy Light Pyramid and becoming White Demon believers. Becoming a White Demon believer is a gift from the gods, and these people are not blessed to enjoy it. They have a more important mission, which is to become the sacrifice of the second sacrifice. What made Rudolph happy was that Duke and Cooper's actions were very efficient, and soon no new trains entered Malone City. The carriages and pedestrians on the road also disappeared, proving that the refugees already knew that Malone City had become the evil god church. Rudolph stared at these sacrifices and waited patiently. The slower the evil god church moved, the better, so that more people could escape from the Malone corridor. Under the illumination of the Holy Light Pyramid, Malone City quickly returned to normal except that the population was reduced by half, but it was the normality of the White Demon Church in the southern continent that was restored. The White Demon believers prayed 3 times a day, morning, noon, and evening. They prostrate themselves devoutly under the Holy Light Pyramid, or prostrate themselves on the streets where the pyramid could be seen. During the prayer period, all roads are closed, and the priests of other evil gods stay in their houses honestly and will not appear in the city's great prayer. They have their own beliefs and cannot pray to the evil god White Devil here. In addition to the prayer time, the priests will select lucky believers to build wonders for the evil god White Devil. The evil god White Devil likes tall and majestic buildings, and there are wonders all over the White Devil parish in the southern continent. The giant obelisk has a base length of 15 meters and a height of hundreds of meters. The temple covered with gold powder, the highest temple has a net height of more than 80 meters inside, and is completely made of huge stones. The arch is a huge project. Many believers work all their lives, and before they die, they will not leave their wealth to their children, but will donate it to the temple, turning it into a layer of gold foil outside the temple. A 1,000-meter-long Shinto will be built in front of the pyramid. The Shinto is 50 meters wide. The ground is not a thin stone slab, but is covered with cubic stones of 1 meter square, which is guaranteed to be used for thousands of years. After leaving the core buildings such as the temple, pyramid, obelisk, and Shinto, the White Demon Church plans straight and wide roads. These roads stretch far into the distance and will eventually be paved to the next White Demon Temple. No dirt roads are allowed between the two holy light pyramids. Whether it is hundreds of kilometers or hundreds of kilometers, they must be stone roads. The Lord of Holy Light cannot stand dust, and all the places where believers crawl must be spotless. In just a few days, the suburbs of Malan City became a large construction site, with priests surveying and measuring everywhere, and believers leveling the ground everywhere. The White Demon Diocese only needs a small number of believers to engage in agricultural production to ensure the most basic food supply for the diocese. The believers do not need any extra enjoyment activities, they only need to devoutly build wonders for the Lord of Holy Light. In addition to their bald heads, the White Demon believers have another notable feature, that is, their skinny bodies and small bulging muscles. They also have two characteristics that should not appear at the same time, skinny and muscular. Except for the priests, other apostles will not appear in the White Demon parish without permission, so that believers will not be harassed by other apostles. This is the most proud place of the White Demon Church. As long as you believe in the Lord of Holy Light, you can avoid being persecuted by other apostles. Under the illumination of the Holy Light Pyramid, believers have no worries. This is the gift of the Lord of Holy Light and the favor of the Lord of Holy Light. Rudolf did not mean to move the Holy Light Pyramid. That was impossible. He only had one level 8 giant air blast bomb and could not deal with the Holy Light Pyramid. After waiting for a week, Rudolf finally waited for the new movement of the sacrifices at the coal storage yard. On this day, the light on the Holy Light Pyramid dimmed a little. The priests drove the sacrifices away from the coal storage yard. These sacrifices had ropes tied around their necks and their hands were tied in front of them. They left Malone City in a string. Rudolf became nervous. The sacrifice of the second temple was about to begin. I don't know if the evil god cult has discovered the Malone corridor for evacuating refugees. If a temple is built in the east of Malone City, the refugees will have to walk a larger arc. The Eagle's Beak Peninsula and the mainland intersect only more than 50 kilometers. Only 3 temples are needed to completely lock the Eagle's Beak Peninsula. What surprised Rudolf was that the evil god cult was not greedy at all this time. They actually stopped about 15 kilometers away from Malone City and prepared to build a temple here. This place is 5 kilometers away from the edge of the temple's faith radiation. If it is at this distance, the Constitution Army outside can't help at all. Rudolf saw a large number of trapped priests. It seemed that a trapped temple was going to be built here. The hard-working White Demon believers continuously sent coal and wood here. There were believers and porters as far as the eye could see on the road. The trapped priest found a high mountain, cut off the top of the mountain, and created a deep pit similar to a crater on the top of the mountain. The White Demon believers poured coal and firewood into the deep pit, and believers spread the coal and firewood under the deep pit. This deep pit like a crater is dozens of meters deep. It is unknown how long it will take to fill it. The surrounding trees were cut down, and the coal stored in Malone City was transported here. Not only that, the trapped church also built a circle of high platforms like diving platforms around the deep pit of the crater, and the high platforms protruded out of the deep pit. Rudolf counted and there were 10 high platforms. For every half-meter thick layer of coal and firewood, the trapped priests would sprinkle fuel on it, so that the combustion would be more complete. It took several days for the believers to finally fill up the pit. The evil god was trapped, and the sacrifice to the god of craftsmen was about to begin. Rudolf looked east from high in the sky, hoping that the refugees would move faster and that the Malin corridor could send more refugees away. Weird Star Witch. Author, White Silver Black Iron. Chapter 726. After the altar was built, the 8th level trapped cardinal priest Dud walked onto a high platform. This high platform is quite special, and its width is 3 times that of other high platforms. Dud knelt on the ground, opened his hands upward, and instantly burst into tears. Great God of craftsmen, you brought fire to mankind, taught mankind how to use fire, how to steam and cook food. You are so great, but the northern continent betrayed you. Now is the time for you to return the fire to the northern continent. Your humble believers, your pious priests, here are offerings for you, please bring down your divine power again. The trapped priests stood between the sacrifices, they cast divine arts, quickly closed the five senses of the sacrifices could not hear, could not see, and could only keep moving forward under the traction of ropes, walking towards the altar from different directions. The huge pit where torches were thrown, the huge pit was filled with layers of coal, wood, and fuel oil. A raging fire soon ignited in the huge pit. Under the action of fuel oil, coal, and firewood burned with a red glow, and thick smoke appeared in the crater, as if it had become a blacksmith's blast furnace. This place really became a crater, a man-made crater. Flame and iron smelting are the symbols of the Church of the God of Craftsmen. It takes a huge amount of faith to project the power of the evil god Kundan to such a far place. Under the leadership of Dud, the Kundan priests drew the divine patterns for sacrifice around the crater. After the first row of sacrifices came to the high platform, they were frightened by the heat wave. His five senses on his face were sealed, but the touch of his skin was still there. The heat wave brought by the high temperature made the sacrifices understand that they were going to die and be burned to death. In the sky, Rudolph stood up from the starlight lizard. He looked down at the altar of the Kundan church and knew that it was time for him to act. The sacrifice of the Kundan church must be destroyed here, otherwise the radiation range of faith will advance another 15 kilometers to the east. He jumped off the starlight lizard and accelerated his dive downward. When the altitude dropped to more than 9,000 meters, he suddenly felt a tightness in his heart. This was a threat, and his intuition of danger gave him the highest level of prompting that his life would be in danger at any time. Rudolph did not hesitate, continued to accelerate, and continued to go down. The cold wind passed through Rudolph's body. He looked up and felt the burning dust in the sky, and his heart was slightly relieved. The sacrifices in the crater were still going on. The first batch of sacrifices had been pushed into the fire pit. These people rolled and wailed in the fire pit, and were soon burned into black charcoal by coal, firewood, and kerosene. The surrounding Kundan priests fell into a carnival. They had already sensed the power of faith that belonged exclusively to the god of craftsmen. At this moment, Dud withdrew his sight from the crater below, no longer admiring the sacrifices dancing in the volcano, and looked up at the sky. There was nothing in the sky, but the hammer in his arms was shaking constantly, giving him a warning. This hammer was the hammer on the evil god Kundan volcano, and it was the hammer that the evil god Kundan had used before. Dud took out the hammer from his arms, and the hammer floated in front of him, automatically pointing to a certain direction in the air. Rudolph frowned. Sure enough, within the radiation range of faith, all the abilities of the evil god were strengthened. Just when Rudolph was ready to deal with the hammer-like artifact, his eyes suddenly lit up. Turning his head in horror in the air, Rudolph saw a strong light. A strong light shot out from the Holy Light Great Pyramid more than 10 kilometers away. The strong light traveled at the speed of light, and more than 10 kilometers was an instant for the light. Rudolph's figure was swallowed by the strong light, leaving only a vague black shadow. When the strong light disappeared, Rudolph, who was in absolute hiding, was left with nothing but ashes. In the sky, a dust exploded, and Rudolph's figure walked out of the flames. He panted and looked in the direction of the Holy Light Great Pyramid with lingering fear. The Holy Light Pyramid could not be seen from here, but the Holy Light Great Pyramid actually launched a fatal blow to Rudolph more than 10 kilometers away. At the top of the Holy Light Great Pyramid, the White Devil Cardinal Priest Balzan stared at the distant sky with a contemptuous smile on his face. It was fine that I was taken advantage of by your furnace before, but this is the parish of the White Devil Church. Even if the furnace can really be resurrected countless times, the Holy Light Pyramid can emit more than countless times of erosion holy light. In the Holy Light Parish, it is absolutely impossible to let others interfere with the establishment of the Second Temple. The cold sweat on Rudolph's head was quickly dried by the cold wind in the sky. He stroked the starlight lizard beside him, and a resolute look flashed in his eyes. He raised his hand and created more than a dozen meteorites in the air. The dust slowly expanded and turned into huge rocks with flames burning on them. After waving his hand, the meteorites began to fall, and Rudolph and the starlight lizard fell one after another. There were more than a dozen meteorites, and the priests on the ground could see with their naked eyes that there was an accident in the sky. After the meteorite entered the radiation range of faith, Rudolph was hit by the holy light. The holy light shone on Rudolph, and instantly dried him up, leaving no ashes. However, Rudolph was resurrected soon, and he appeared in the tail flame of the meteorite. What greeted Rudolph was the second holy light that followed. Rudolph died without any surprise, and this was his third death. This time he learned not to revive immediately, but to revive after a few seconds. During the time he disappeared, the holy light kept shooting out, breaking the three meteorites. However, the broken meteorite was still emitting flames. This level 6 fire wizard was very good at burning. Even if the meteorite was completely shattered, the flame would burn for a long time before it went out. Rudolph was resurrected in the flames again, and he was waiting for the attack of the holy light. There was no doubt that he was dead again. In this chaos and tug of war, the starlight lizard kept landing silently. Everyone's attention was focused on the furnace, and no one paid attention to the starlight lizard next to it. In the repeated battles with the holy light, Rudolph's height became lower and lower, and there were only 3 meteorites left beside him. White Demon Cardinal Priest Balzan was not in a hurry, because there was still a trapped Cardinal Priest on the altar, and it was impossible for the furnace to be taken so easily. At this moment, Rudolph finally opened his trump card, the 5-second Absolute Prophet of the level 7 Word Spirit. As an absolute ability, the Absolute Prophet is an ability that even the evil god's divine power cannot restrain. This time, the Absolute Prophet is not used to protect himself, but to let the starlight lizard continue to descend. The holy light shone on Rudolph, and the artifact hammer of trapped instantly swept through all the meteorites, smashing them. The starlight lizard dodged all the attacks, dodged several holy lights, dodged the second swing of the hammer of trapped, and came to the crater. The starlight lizard opened its mouth, and the 8-level giant air blast bomb inside exploded in the crater. With a roar, the red crater turned into a terrifying mushroom cloud in the explosion, just like a real volcanic eruption. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Weird Star Witch. Author, White Silver Black Iron. Chapter 727. High in the sky, the weak Rudolph walked out of the burning dust. This was his 8th resurrection. If he was resurrected again, he would hand over and return to the past. Only half of the upper limit of star power was left, and his whole body felt weak, but Rudolph was in a very good mood. He successfully delayed the sacrifice of the troubled church. Towering mushroom clouds, shock waves visible to the naked eye, flying rocks and coal briquettes, the ground became a flaming hell. The power of the level 8 giant airburst bomb was very powerful. The Church of Trouble filled the artificial crater with too much coal. Under the stimulation of the giant airburst bomb, the hot coal turned into red fireballs and shot out in all directions. The crater's mountain mass was shattered by the explosion, and red rocks and burning coal briquettes sputtered around. The low-level priests were directly burned to death, and the high-level priests had nothing to do when faced with level 8 giant airburst bombs. Even 2 level 7 priests died. The level 7 trapped priest who survived was close enough to Cardinal Priest Dowd, and the artifact Hammer of Trouble blocked most of the explosion power, allowing him and Dowd to survive. Looking at Dowd, Rudolph felt a little unhappy. Isn't this a lie? Carrying an artifact with you is like carrying a golden finger. Even giant air-burst bombs can't kill him. It would be nice if he had 2 giant air-burst bombs. If he gives Dowd another one at this time, the power of faith will be consumed a lot, and he will definitely die. The giant air-burst ignited the deep coal, and the shock wave carried the burning coal and the rocks of the mountain. Like a dense rain of bullets, it shot at the surrounding priests and the surrounding sacrifices. Each famous sacrifice died miserably among the red coal particles. In order to avoid harming the sacrifices, Rudolph deliberately made the giant air blast bomb explode in the air instead of exploding on the ground, but he missed one thing. The artificial crater, which is tens of meters deep, has become a giant explosive pit that kills people. Rudolph turned his head. A person with no moral sense like him would not dare to look closely at the miserable state of the sacrifice. For sacrifices, there is no essential difference between being burned to death and being blown up. Before the priests could find him, Rudolph quickly fled to the east. The mushroom cloud here is so high that people in Malong City in the west can see it, and people fleeing in the Malong corridor in the east can also see it. Duke looked at the mushroom cloud and wondered what the furnace had done to increase the power of the giant air blast bomb so much that such a high mushroom cloud appeared. This artificial crater gathered all the coal storage in Malong City. Malong City didn't have much coal to begin with. After all the coal was blown up by Rudolph, the difficult church didn't know how long it would take to replenish the coal. As for the sacrifices, without the replenishment of the population, they are more difficult to collect. Rudolph quickly flew away from the temple's faith radiation range, and he saw Cooper and Duke on the top of a hill. Rudolph looked around with a panic on his face. Where is Yvonne? Seeing the sudden appearance of the furnace, Duke quickly explained. Miss Yvonne first took a trip to the Malone corridor to ensure that this route is safe. Miss Yvonne left the Eagle's Beak Peninsula and waited for us in Buell City, the terminus of the Malone corridor. Rudolph nodded. It was good to leave the Eagle Beak Peninsula, it was safer. No matter what level of werewolf Yvonne is, Rudolph always feels that Yvonne needs protection. Mr. Furnace, is that mushroom cloud? I destroyed the sacrificial ceremony of the difficult church. I fought for at least 2 weeks. During these 2 weeks, we must evacuate the refugees as soon as possible and let them leave the Eagle Beak Peninsula to prevent them from becoming sacrifices to the evil cult. Cooper could tell that something was wrong with Rudolph's mental state because he saw panic on Rudolph's face. This surprised Cooper very, very much. Even if it was a very difficult thing, Rudolph would avoid it at most and run away at most, but this kind of panic is a rare emotion. Moreover, Cooper saw fine cold sweat on Rudolph's forehead and cheeks, which was even more rare. Cooper said aloud, "Rudolph, are you going to find Yvonne? Maybe you will be better with Yvonne." Rudolph shook his head, looked at the refugees migrating on the winding road at the foot of the mountain, and said, "This is too close to the temple, and I can't rest yet." Duke heard the conversation between the Green Skull and the Forge, and even though he wasn't very familiar with the Forge, he noticed something strange about the Forge. Looking carefully, Furnace's pupils were twitching and tightening, and his muscles were stiff. He didn't know what was wrong with him. That afternoon, the witch hunter brought Duke a piece of shocking information. "Director Duke, the evil god cult is spreading news that the Forge used level 8 giant air burst bombs to attack civilians in Malong City. A total of 5,000 people died in the Forge's attack." The witch hunter's voice was so small because the news left the witch hunter in disbelief. Most of the heretical apostles committed many evil deeds, but there was a bottom line that everyone agreed upon, which was not to kill ordinary people on a large scale. Killing more than 5,000 people, if this news spreads, it will definitely become a sensation in the mainland. Unless it was a brutal high-level heretic apostle who went mad in the final act before his death, such incidents were very rare. Duke suddenly understood what was going on in the furnace a few hours ago. The furnace was said to have stopped the sacrifices of the trapped church, possibly by killing all the sacrifices. Duke's heart beat violently, and after a moment he murmured to comfort himself. It is so normal for the evil god to sacrifice thousands of people. That is the evil god, that is a real demigod, and he is qualified to sacrifice thousands of people. However, the nature of wizards killing thousands of people has changed. If this news is true, then the furnace will definitely become the worst murderer. Director, what should we do? Many people tend to believe that this is true. The sacrifices in the troubled church have stopped. Is the furnace really doing this? What's even more exaggerated is that the evil god cult launched a security war against the furnace, saying that the furnace cruelly slaughtered civilians, violated the evil god's bottom line, and was unacceptable to all apostles. What? The evil cult is going to launch a security war against the furnace? How can they be so shameless? After thinking for a while, Duke said, "We also spread rumors, saying that the evil cult failed to sacrifice and thousands of sacrifices died in vain, but we blamed the furnace." The witch hunters' men were very confused. "I don't think the rumors we spread have any credibility. There is no other way. We try our best to help and don't let the furnace bear more criticism. After all, he bought us half a month. During this half month, tens of thousands of people will leave the Eagle's Beak Peninsula. He has already taken the risk and entered the temple's faith radiation range, and he cannot be allowed to suffer any more mental blows. Even though Furnace carries such a bad reputation, he still thinks he is a good person, otherwise he would not take risks for the refugees at this time." Duke's tone was full of regret, and he felt unworthy of the furnace. The subordinate said in embarrassment, "There are some new believers among the refugees. Some people from the Eagle's Beak Peninsula have been influenced by the smuggled believers. They will help the evil cult spread rumors. I have no good way to completely prevent the spread of rumors. Just do your best." Weird Star Witch. Author, White Silver Black Iron. Chapter 728. Rudolph appeared beside the refugees, and wanted to observe why the refugees were so slow. In his opinion, these refugees were still too slow. However, when he approached the refugees, he found that all the refugees were discussing one thing. The butcher furnace had just killed thousands of people with witchcraft in Malone City, and was now cruising around the outskirts of Malone City, ready to continue killing. These people had not seen Rudolph's portrait. Even if they had, they could not connect the young man in a suit next to him with the butcher furnace. Rudolph did not look like a vicious person. When he first heard this rumor, Rudolph could still face it calmly. As he heard more and more discussions, his mood became more and more depressed. Until someone recognized Rudolph, he didn't know where he had seen the furnace's wanted order. Maybe it was the wanted order of the East Elba royal family, maybe it was the wanted order of the Carolingian United States. In short, he recognized the furnace. Furnace. It's the butcher furnace. The man was so scared that tears appeared on his face, his whole body was sore, and he rolled and crawled back. For a moment, everyone around knew a terrible news: the butcher furnace appeared. When Duke arrived, he saw the furnace hiding in the distant mountains, watching the migrating refugees. "Sorry, Mr. Furnace, we failed to stop the spread of rumors. The witch hunters are too weak and we don't have enough manpower." Duke looked very nervous. He was really afraid that the furnace would explode and they would lose their last trump card. The furnace is the sharpest dagger against the evil god cult. It has defeated or delayed the evil god cult's plans several times. A level 7 wizard has done this, which has convinced all the witch hunters. It's not your fault. If there is a fraud priest to help spread the news, no matter how false the news is, many people will believe it. This news can be spread so quickly, there must be the shadow of the fraud priest in it. It is very difficult to identify fraudulent priests. Ordinary people may be fraudulent priests, police officers may be fraudulent priests, and witch hunters may also be fraudulent priests. It is too easy for them to hide themselves. Cooper looked at Rudolph worriedly. He knew that this incident was a big blow to Rudolph, but Rudolph just acted as if he didn't care. Cooper has been with Rudolph for so long, and he knows that Rudolph is particularly careful and tries not to hurt innocent people. Those who know the truth understand that the furnace accidentally hurt the sacrifice in order to stop the evil cult from offering sacrifices, but very few people believe the truth. Others will only think that the furnace is crazy and uses witchcraft to kill ordinary people crazily. The furnace is a bloody title, and the title of the butcher furnace is even more terrifying. Rudolph smiled and said, "You see, since the butcher furnace appeared nearby, the refugees have moved much faster. They don't feel tired anymore, and they move faster and faster under the drive of fear." 2 weeks later, Duke brought good news. "Mr. Furnace, the carriage from Belfour has entered the Malone corridor. It proves that half of the people on the Eagle's Beak Peninsula have already fled the Eagle's Beak Peninsula." After hearing the news, Rudolph let out a long sigh. Belfour is located in the middle of the Eagle's Beak Peninsula. If the carriage from Belfour enters the Malone corridor, it proves that most of the people north of Belfour have already escaped safely. Duke was very happy. This news would definitely make Furnace happy. Furnace took the risk and bore a bad reputation, just to let more people escape. He was about to leave when he heard Furnace calling him. "Director Duke, don't leave yet," Rudolph asked. "Why hasn't the Constitutional Army gathered its forces here? Why is the Constitutional Army so slow to react? I only saw police officers and witch hunters from nearby cities in the Malone corridor. Where is the Constitutional Army?" Duke couldn't hide the question of Furnace. He calmly and sadly told a bad news. "Mr. Furnace, the Constitutional Army was going to enter the Eagle's Beak Peninsula to fight against the evil god cult, but the werewolves on the Wolf Tide began to exert their strength, and all the mountains west of Luberon City were lost, and Luberon City became the front line. On the noble side of the Eastern Front, the Crown Prince of the royal family, Tazdan, a level 7 knight, personally led the royal knights to the front line and launched a large-scale attack on the Constitutional Army on the Eastern Front. Not only did Rudolph stay where he was, but even people like Cooper who didn't pay much attention to the situation on the mainland heard the problem. Cooper asked angrily, "Are the people in the northern continent crazy? Is there no one here? Do the people in the Eagle's Beak Peninsula deserve to die?" Duke didn't know how to answer. He knew that the Green Skull was not questioning him, but just venting his emotions. They risked danger and moved around the faith radiation range of the temple in fear, just to prevent more people from becoming sacrifices. However, their efforts were just sad self-help. No one on the mainland cared about what happened in the Eagle's Beak Peninsula. Duke, who was born and raised in the Eagle's Beak Peninsula, felt that history was all false at this moment. The story in history books about the northern continent working together to drive the evil gods into the sea seemed to be a lie. No one cared whether the belief in evil gods was evil. There is also good news. I heard that the Royal Midnight Knights of the Megwen Empire have begun to gather. They have obtained the permission of the kingdoms and the United States along the way and are about to embark on the road to the south to complete the sacred exorcism agreement and fight against the evil gods at the southern end of the continent. Speed, the most important thing is speed. How long will it take them to reach the Eagle's Beak Peninsula? Duke hesitated and said, "The specific time is hard to estimate. The kingdoms and the United States along the way said they fully support the sacred exorcism agreement. The Lothair royal family said that as long as they complete the rebellion and defeat the domestic rebels, the Carolingian Alchemy Council, they will accept the command of Emperor Megwen. The Carolingian Senate said that they are completing the voting process and passing the anti-restoration bill as soon as possible. As long as the nobles give up the idea of restoration, they will send troops into West Elba. The Cantal Senate said that they can't wait to assemble the Constitutional Army, and as long as the Midnight Knights enter the territory of West Elba, they will send troops immediately. Even the Blood Clan Castle has spread the news that they will fight against the evil god together, just waiting for the sleeping ancient blood clan to wake up. The druids have not made any statements until now, and I don't know why. The Crown Prince of East Elba, Thorsten, said that their knights will come to the Eagle's Beak Peninsula in person to fight against the evil god. Before that, the constitutional army along the way must unconditionally surrender to the royal knights and be loyal to the royal family. Rudolph wanted to laugh. I didn't expect everyone to be so active. I think you in the Senate must be very moved. Haha, Mr. Furness, we know that we have been abandoned by the northern continent. The so-called sacred exorcism agreement is just a piece of waste paper. Rudolph sighed and asked, what about the Eastern Front? The Crown Prince personally led the Royal Knights to launch an offensive. Can you hold on? I don't know. Crown Prince Tazdan, right? I remember him. He has the blood of the Eagle's Beak Peninsula on his hands. I hope he can be as tough as the Cardinal Priest. In Rudolph's dictionary, this Crown Prince must die. Weird Star Witch. Author, White Silver Black Iron. Chapter 729. The people of the Eagle Beak Peninsula understand that migration has entered a critical period, and so do the people of the evil god cult. If the migration continues for another week, there will be very few remaining sacrifices, and there may be competition among the churches, which will destroy the current situation of sincere cooperation among the evil cults. Duke approached Rudolph. Mr. Furness. Oh no. The evil cult wants to retaliate against you for destroying the sacrifice. A large number of priests appeared in the direction of Malong City, led by 5 level 8 cardinal priests. Rudolph withdrew his gaze from the refugees and turned to look in the direction of Malong City. 5 cardinals, Rudolph thought for a while and said. The deceitful cardinal priest should be hiding in the dark. The Hive cardinal priest was killed by me in Balfourport and later appeared in Dani City. Then what is left is sleepiness, white devil, pain, annihilation, and abstinence, these 5 cardinal priests. Rudolph doesn't know how to win with this lineup. He asked Duke, hasn't the Constitutional Army sent in the 8-level giant airburst bomb yet? No. Duke shook his head, his face full of despair. The giant airburst bombs produced in recent months have to be sent to the Luberon region on the western front and the Condor Mountains on the eastern front. The 2 giant airburst bombs on the Eagle's Beak Peninsula are already the limit that the Constitutional Army can dispatch. Rudolph raised his hand and rubbed his eyebrows, and then said after a long time. Without level 8 giant airburst bombs, it's useless to go to any number of witch hunters in front of level 8 cardinal priests and artifacts, it's the same as dying. You go all out to transport the refugees. Apostles, don't be stingy with your abilities. Use your apostolic power to transport refugees. One more is worth sending. I'm going to procrastinate, try my best to procrastinate, and I guess I can last one night. One night, this was our last chance. Looking at Rudolph's tired back, Cooper said to Duke, I remember that you also awarded the Furnace the title of Outstanding Citizen of Belfour City. If the Furnace has achieved this level, is it worthy of this title? Duke didn't dare to say anything new. Because Furnace robbed the 8-level giant airburst bomb, the congressman believed that this was a great threat to the property and lives of the members, and had deprived Furnace of the title of Outstanding Citizen. If you tell me, I wonder what will happen to the Furnace, and the green skull on the side will probably explode. It's worthy, not only worthy, Mr. Furnace's contribution far exceeds that of any person from the Eagle's Crane Peninsula. Who would have thought that the person who dragged the Eagle's Crane Peninsula out of the quagmire at the last moment was a wizard? Or does he now have an extremely bad reputation? The butcher's furnace. Cooper reminded him, don't mention the word butcher in front of him. This will be a mental blow to him. He must not want to see so many sacrifices die. Duke quickly shut up. Fortunately, the furnace was far away and he probably didn't hear it. Cooper summoned the corpse tablet, and corpses emerged from the corpse tablet one after another. Fortunately, These corpses can generate the power of apostles on their own, otherwise I would die of exhaustion. Cooper, who has the entire legacy of the City of Death, has an astonishing number of corpses, at least 2,000 corpses and thousands of shadows and ghosts. Corpses can be used as transportation vehicles to transport refugees. Corpses of various shapes rushed down from the hills and began to capture the refugees. The corpses brought chaos to the refugee team, and the numerous corpses were like local visitors. There is no time to explain that these corpses are here to help. It is better to knock them unconscious and take them away. The giant was the most dazzling. The giant, which was hundreds of meters tall, waved its big hands and grabbed a dozen refugees. Then it placed the refugees on top of its head and shouted in a dull voice, "Hold your hair, don't let it fall." The stinking hair and giant corpses exuding corpse odor frightened the refugees. The witch hunters shouted loudly, "These corpses are our own." Cooperating with the corpses can speed up their escape, over the head, on the shoulders, under the armpits, on the palms. More than a dozen giant corpses led these people, striding towards run far away. The people sitting on the top of the head looked at the people trapped under the armpits with sympathetic eyes. The armpits of the giant corpse were full of pus, and the stench was extremely stench. The knight's corpse directly tied as many people as possible to the carriage, then lifted the carriage, including the people and the carriage, and ran towards the north. The vampire corpses were also tied together with ropes. Under one vampire corpse hung 3 or 5 balls tied by refugees and flew to the north. In short, these corpses used their own methods to take away as many refugees as possible. Witch hunters and police officers are mainly responsible for maintaining order, urging those who have not been taken away by the corpse to speed up, stop running if they can, and leave the Malin corridor as soon as possible. In this situation, only one person can be saved. The witch hunter has no time to explain and will just throw away their luggage and let them escape as quickly as possible. Duke suddenly turned around and looked at the sky in the distance. "Is this going to start a war?" One of his men handed over the telescope, and Duke saw in the telescope that in the distant sky, meteorites fell and sky arrows shot to the ground like rain. Furness has already met 5 level 8 cardinal priests. It should be difficult for him, a level 7 wizard, to face 5 level 8 priests alone. Although this place is not within the faith radiation range of the temple, the strength of the priests is still astonishingly strong. "Speed up, you can save just one person." The men left quickly. They had reached their limit and didn't know what else they could do to speed up the refugees. At this moment, a large number of airships suddenly appeared in the south. They were airships of the Constitutional Army. The Constitutional Army abandoned the Eagle's Beak Peninsula. There were more than 20 airships in the Eagle's Beak Peninsula, and they were the last force on the Eagle's Beak Peninsula. An airship hovered above the hill, and the Constitutional Army Division Commander Rubio landed on the hill. He asked, "What is the situation now?" "Mr. Furness is fighting against 5 cardinal priests alone. He said this is the last night. He has used an 8-level giant airburst bomb. He will try his best to delay and buy time for the migration of refugees." Rubio was silent. He sighed and said, "I shouldn't have listened to the council and left the last giant airburst bomb in Belfour City. If we had fought the evil cult in Malone City early, maybe we would have more time to escape." Duke glanced at the endless stream of refugees and asked, "How many refugees are there behind?" "There are no refugees south of Belfour City. The more than 200 kilometers from Belfour City to here are full of refugees." "Are there that many more?" "Yes, the refugees from the southernmost city of Maha have just passed through the city of Belfour." Duke closed his eyes and seemed to see a road of death that stretched for more than 200 kilometers. The refugees on this road were still happy at this time, because they did not know that the Malon corridor would be closed tonight, and they thought they could still escape. Duke couldn't help but ask, "But Belfour City can't be saved. Shouldn't the congressman give up on Belfour City?" they pinned their hopes on the Constitutional Army Navy to defeat the evil God Navy. After the failure of the naval battle at the mouth of the Garonne River, all hesitation seemed very stupid. We are all inferior to the furnace. If the furnace hadn't directly grabbed the giant air-burst bomb, I think this corridor wouldn't even exist. Rubio no longer dwelled on his previous mistakes. He issued an order for the Constitutional Army airship to go west to join the battle with the heretic cult. This is the last thing the Constitutional Army will do for the Eagle's Beak Peninsula. I hope we can add even 1 hour to the refugees' escape time. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Weird Star Witch. Author, White Silver Black Iron. Chapter 730. Hart, the speaker of the Eagle's Beak province, was standing by the railing of the airship, holding a telescope and looking at the battle scene in the distance. The airship was very fast and had taken the councillors of Belfort out of the Malone corridor and escaped from the Eagle's Beak Peninsula. His hands kept shaking and his face was pale, like white frost. In the telescope, meteorites and sky arrows from the furnace kept falling, and the purple giant starlight snake was smashed by various artifacts. What made Hart even more painful was that the airships of the Constitutional Army were shot down one by one. The airbags of some airships were blown up, and the airships fell to the ground in free fall. The cabins of some airships were directly penetrated or cut off, losing their combat capabilities. He put down the telescope with trembling hands, looked blankly at the area where the battle took place, and looked blankly at the Malone corridor, which was like a snake and composed of refugees. No one criticized him, but he now understood that he should not have illusions, should not think about retaining the wealth of Belfort, and should not pin his hopes on the Constitutional Army Navy. The Constitutional Army Navy lost to the evil God Navy, and the Eagle's Beak Peninsula's precious escape time was wasted by him. It was he who made the Parliament pass a bill that did not allow the Level 8 giant air blast bomb to leave Belfort. Later, the furnace took away the Level 8 giant air blast bomb, and he ignored the opposition of the Constitutional Army and the Court of Inquiry and forced the Parliament to deprive the furnace of the title of Outstanding Citizen. He dared not imagine the refugees who were still far south of Malone City. They would never have the chance to leave the Eagle's Beak Peninsula again. The battle lasted from night to early morning and lasted for another hour after early morning. Until the sun had risen to the sky, the strength of the White Demon Priest was enhanced, the strength of the wizard was weakened, and the battle in the distance slowly subsided. A lone airship flew back from the airspace of the battle. Of the 28 airships participating in the battle, 27 were shot down, and only the last one returned. This airship was not a flagship airship, but just an ordinary airship. After the battle, everyone looked back, but could not see the slightest shadow of dawn. What rose in the east was not the sun, but darkness. The refugees seemed to sense the danger and instinctively ran, but it was too late. They heard the sound of breaking air. Iron pillars crossed the sky, bypassed the refugees, and shot towards the exit of the Malone corridor. It was a slightly wider mountain pass, and the iron pillars directly nailed the refugees in front to the ground. The iron pillars quickly split, and one by one, the iron pillars extended densely to both sides, and in a short time, a steel fence was erected on the road and both sides. The trapped iron wall, this is a trap magic that has appeared in history. The refugees hurriedly ran to the mountains on both sides, but it was too late. The first iron pillar quickly split, forming a tight fence, forming a high iron wall at the exit of the Malone corridor. The wall was covered with barbs, and it was impossible to climb. On the last airship, Rudolph leaned weakly against the railing and turned his head to look at the Malone corridor. After just one glance, he turned his head and looked down at his knees. It was over. He had done everything he could. The Malone corridor was over, and so was the Eagle's Beak Peninsula. The protagonist in the story can always overcome all difficulties and achieve his goal. Rudolph was a failed traverser, a failed protagonist in the story. The refugees climbed up the iron wall, not even afraid of the barbs piercing their arms and legs, just hoping to escape. The refugees behind him burst into tears, and all the refugees squeezed forward as much as they could, squeezing the refugees in front of them against the iron wall, and were pierced to death by the barbs of the iron wall. Those barbs can grow freely, and after piercing a person, they leaked out from the back and grew another half-meter. A few minutes later, the refugees were horrified to find that no matter how many refugees were pierced to death by the barbs, they would not cover the barbs, and the barbs would always be half a meter longer than the body. Some refugees knew that the road ahead was blocked, and hurriedly fled to a farther place. However, their speed was completely inferior to the speed of the iron pillar splitting. The iron pillar seemed endless and extended to both sides. Those who lived in the southern half of the Eagle's Beak Peninsula, after a long journey, failed to escape the Eagle's Beak Peninsula and were blocked in the last Malin corridor. There was a long queue in the south of the Malin corridor. I don't know who cried first, but the cry began to spread. Those who couldn't cry out also had tears on their faces. At the exit of the Malin corridor, some refugees who escaped turned back to save their relatives and friends. However, the barbs were also effective for people in the north. After many people died from the barbs, people woke up. The priests appeared on the hill, looking down at the refugees and their sacrifices. For the evil god cult, they finally caught up. About 1/3 of the people on the Eagle's Beak Peninsula were blocked in front of the Malin corridor. This was their victory. 1/3 of the people on the Eagle's Beak Peninsula were enough for the evil god cult to build a temple for each evil god. 5 cardinal priests stood on the hill, looking at the last airship, each with a solemn expression. The furnace refreshed his number of resurrections, a full 30 times. The furnace resurrected 30 times in front of the 5 cardinal priests, and finally retreated calmly. At this moment, they even felt that there was something wrong with the oracle. Why could a wizard be resurrected 30 times? Is there something in this world that the great gods don't know? White Magic Cardinal Priest Balzan said. I heard from the Priest of Wisdom that the great goddess of wisdom has discovered the power of omniscience. The furnace is related to the power of omniscience, so the furnace has a means of resurrection that even the Lord God does not know. The evil god is fraud, and his name is the goddess of wisdom. Other priests try to avoid dealing with the fraud priest. Every time the goddess of wisdom or the priest of the goddess of wisdom appears, people around them will be terrified. The ascetic cardinal priest Bridget said, the power of omniscience will belong to the goddess of wisdom, and the furnace will become the prey of the goddess of wisdom. The lonely airship slowly landed. On the airship, Hid from Danny City came forward and asked, Mr. Furnace, do you need some water? Hid's heart was trembling. Even the powerful Furnace was so weak that he couldn't stand up. No need. Hid said, Mr. Furnace, the Blood Vengeance Organization will be your most loyal servant in the future. We are willing to sacrifice our lives for you. In the battle with the evil god priest, the Furnace won the respect of the people of the Eagle's Beak Peninsula. Hid now wanted to die for Mr. Furnace. However, he found that Mr. Furnace shook his head. Rudolph said, Why do you want to sacrifice your life for me? There is no need. Your program is good. Don't forget the hatred, fight with hatred, resist the evil god cult, and avenge your family. Go on, hater, this is your responsibility, and it is the fate of the surviving people of Eagle's Beak Peninsula. The airship landed, and some news spread. The Furnace was resurrected 30 times and blocked the evil god cult for one night. Almost all the garrison troops of the Constitutional Army on Eagle's Beak Peninsula died. Division Commander Rubio died in battle, 3 brigade commanders headed by Brooke died in battle, and 15 regiment commanders died in battle. Among the 65 battalion commanders, the only surviving battalion commander was Hader from Danny City, who sent the weak furnace out. 158 soldiers survived, and only the soldiers on Hayter's airship survived. In the temporary refugee camp, the wailing bagpipes lasted for several hours, and it did not stop for a long time. On the other hand, inside the iron wall to the south, the crying stopped abruptly at some point, and a dull prayer was heard, as if by some unknown means. Eagle's Beak Peninsula is over. The setback is temporary, and the protagonist will be promoted soon, so don't worry, book friends. Weird Star Witch. Author, White Silver Black Iron. Chapter 731. On the second day after the Malin corridor was closed, Yvonne, Cooper, Hart, the former Speaker of the Eagle's Beak Province, Duke, the former Director of the Court of Justice of the Eagle's Beak Province, Captain Hat, and others were all waiting in front of a candle. They looked at the candle with expectant eyes, and then the candle began to burst, and a figure appeared in the candle. Who would have thought that the furnace had to use the fire rebirth to recover from injuries in a non-combat situation? I heard from Yvonne that the abstinence artifact, the silence harp, seriously injured the furnace, which reduced the blood flow rate of the furnace. If the furnace had not contained a lot of constellation relics, he would have died of blood coagulation. The reappearing Rudolph's face was no longer pale, he felt lighter and much better. Rudolph glanced at Speaker Hart, and Hart lowered his head guiltily. There was no more entanglement, and it was useless to say anything now. He asked Director Duke, "Duke, you said that on the Eastern Front, the Crown Prince of East Elba came to the front line to supervise the battle and tied down the strength of the Constitutional Army." Duke didn't know why the furnace asked this. He said truthfully, "Yes, Mr. Furnace." Rudolph nodded and said to Yvonne, "Yvonne, Cooper, you go to Garan first, wait for me in Garan." "Where are you going?" I'm going to the Eastern Front to talk to the nobles." After leaving the tent, Rudolph saw the refugees outside who continued to flee north. These people escaped by chance, and they were still in shock. This place is too close to the evil god priest, full of danger and uncertainty, and the refugees can't wait to continue to go north. He faced south again and saw the iron wall of distress that could not be seen to the left or right. That was the artifact of the trapped cardinal priest Dud. He not only mastered the trapped hammer, but also the trapped iron wall, which could create an iron wall of amazing length in a short time to trap the enemy. On the black iron wall, the bodies of dead refugees were hung. The evil god cult had no intention of cleaning up the bodies, and they had to keep these bodies to scare others. The dried blood gave the iron wall a rusty color. The evil god cult had no intention of continuing to attack northward. They had tied up the pocket of the Eagle's Beak Peninsula, and it seemed that they wanted to digest the Eagle's Beak Peninsula. Now only 3 evil gods have established temples, and the other evil god priests must be very anxious. Rudolph suddenly thought of some people and turned to ask Duke, "Have the people from the Black Gold Institute come out?" Duke shook his head, "No, the Black Gold Institute has always been in contact with the evil god cult. They are just businessmen, and it doesn't matter who they do business with." The pungent smell of blood and rottenness drifted into the nostrils from time to time. It was the stench from the south. In the direction of the Eagle's Beak Peninsula, it seemed as if the sky had turned black. Without saying a word, Rudolph disappeared. Yvonne and Cooper led the scavengers to the north, and they would wait for Rudolph in Garan. Speaker Hart followed Duke, and the identities of the two sides were reversed. Hart was the speaker who lost the province, and Duke was the witch hunter who did his best to cooperate with the furnace and rescued half of the people of the Eagle's Beak Peninsula from the hands of the evil god cult. "Director Duke, how do you think the furnace will reason with the nobles?" "Don't call me director anymore. The Eagle's Beak Peninsula is gone. What kind of director am I?" Duke didn't give Hart a good look and left with his witch hunters. "The Garan Regional Court will arrange new jobs for them, and everything belonging to the Eagle's Beak Peninsula is over." In the southernmost part of the Eagle's Beak Peninsula, a ship slowly entered the small port of Dani City. There were not many ships entering Dani port. The priests went forward to search and saw the sign of the Black Gold Institute and quickly let them go. The Black Gold Institute is very special now. It is the first organization approved by the gods to trade freely on the Eagle's Beak Peninsula. The Black Gold Institute has always existed in the southern continent. The evil god cult recognizes the trading ability of the Black Gold Institute, which can bring a lot of urgently needed materials to the evil god cult. Celine walked down the gangway wearing the robe of the Black Gold Institute. There was a clear Black Gold Institute Libra logo on her clothes, which could avoid a lot of trouble. She walked into the interior of Dani City, and her face under the cloak was very ugly. Dani City is her hometown, but now she feels so strange here. The Oblivion priests kept digging ditches in Dani City to bring seawater into the city. The Oblivion priests and believers don't like roads. They prefer slender boats and arch bridges. The dense river channels make this place a water city, which is the characteristic of the Oblivion Church City. After a few steps, Celine met the guide of the Black Gold Institute here. The guide prepared the boat and rowed a few people into the city. The door of a house was demolished and transformed into a doorway for a small boat to enter directly. The small boat entered the building. Half of the original living room of the building was demolished and filled with seawater, and the other half was built with steps to form a miniature dock. After Celine stepped on the ground, she felt much more stable for the first time. The Oblivion Church's hobbies were too bizarre, and they were not afraid that the sea level would rise and submerge the entire Dani City. In the basement of this house, Celine met the person she wanted to see. The Black Gold Institute in the South Continent secretly rescued 2 wizards and secretly sent them to the North Continent. When Celine entered the basement had already seeped more than 10 centimeters of water. The 2 wizards were sitting back to back on the table, and they didn't react when they saw someone coming down. The trapped wizards sealed their 5 senses, otherwise they would cause trouble. 2 level 5 wizards are not easy to deal with. If they are not careful, the evil god will know that the Black Gold is hiding wizards. The Black Gold is run by the Libra wizard. It is okay for a Libra wizard to appear here, but there are 2 twin wizards. This cannot be explained. Due to the excellent performance of the furnace, the evil god now hates wizards very much. Once they are found, they will be burned to death immediately. Celine put away the trapped wizard that controlled the 2, and the 2 saw the person coming. Ahriman, Blanca, you 2 are very lucky to be found by the Black Gold. If you fall into the hands of the evil god, no one can save you, not even your teacher. The 2 met Celine in Belfort City and knew that the trader of the Black Gold was a friend of the teacher. Miss Celine, I'm sorry to trouble you. We made quite a stir when we were promoted, which led to us being hunted by the evil god cult. We had no choice but to run to the Black Gold Institute in the city of the southern continent. Your choice is right. The Black Gold Institute is the only organization that can save you. Come with me, I will have someone send you out of the Eagle's Beak Peninsula. The 2 have been locked up and don't understand the current situation. Ahriman asked, Miss Celine, why do you want to send us out of the Eagle's Beak Peninsula? The evil god cult has completely occupied the Eagle's Beak Peninsula. In a few days, the 5th temple will be built in sacrifice. What? The Eagle's Beak Peninsula has become the parish of the evil god cult. Yes. But, the system, where are the constitutional army and the teacher? Your teacher tried his best. He repeatedly delayed the establishment of the temple. As for the constitutional army, because the nobles and werewolves were working at the same time, the main force of the constitutional army had no time to take care of the Eagle's Beak Peninsula. We can understand werewolves. Werewolves without humanity are no different from beasts. What about the nobles? How can they be accomplices? Celine sighed, in the eyes of the king of East Elba, there is only the power of eternal life. Who cares about a peninsula? When she came outside, Celine looked at her strange hometown, the Oblivion Temple at the pier, the black vortex floating on the Oblivion Temple, and the Danny crawling on the arch bridge. It was as if a huge stone was pressing on her heart. She breathed hard and her eyes were sad.